We haven't had him on for a while, so I'm glad to have him. And I hit him up yesterday. He was nice enough to say yes. So Robert Fatima, he is an author, journalist, and activist working for peace, social justice. He is author of the new book Settler Colonialism in Palestine and Kashmir. Robert, man, welcome to the show. How you doing today? You doing all right?
Thank you very much. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for joining me. Seeing as you wrote the book on settler colonialism, I want to get your take on the same question that I asked Scott. Basically, just to preempt it, I was showing in the clip that Netanyahu said, basically, yeah, Trump is allowing a temporary ceasefire. And he was effectively saying that this is a ceasefire in name only. That was the connotation that he effectively gave with it. And Ritter's point was, well, this is not a ceasefire in name only. Donald Trump doesn't necessarily want a war in the Middle East. He wants to kind of end these conflicts. I want to, and in fact, I want to preempt that with something else, or at the very least, I want to piggyback that with something else. Let me get your take on this clip, because when I first saw this clip, this blew my mind. Because for up to this point, everything that has come out for Trump has been completely obsequious to Netanyahu. I played this clip for the audience once before the audience has seen it. But this is Donald Trump talking about Netanyahu and talking about Abbas. And listen to this.
I think it's a terrible personal trait. I haven't spoken to him since, right? I didn't talk to him. I thought he wanted to make a deal more than Netanyahu. And I will be honest, I had a great meeting with him, Abbas, right? I had a great meeting with him. And we spent a lot of time together, talked about many things. And it was almost like a father. I mean, he was so nice. Couldn't have been nicer. And after meeting with Bibi for 3 minutes, I looked at him and said, you don't want to make a deal, do you? And he said, well, and the fact is, I don't think Bibi ever wanted to make a deal.
Why?
I thought the Palestinians were impossible, that the Israelis would do anything to make peace and a deal. I found that not to be true.
I was blown away by that clip. And the reason why I give Scott some credence in saying that, well, yeah, maybe Trump doesn't want this kind of war to propagate in the Middle East, that he does want some kind of deal in the Middle East. It's the clips like that, and even the Jeffrey Sachs one, where Jeffrey Sachs called Netanyahu a deep, dark son of a bitch, saying that he was pushing the United States into all of these wars, and that basically impugning Netanyahu's character, whatever that character is. Give me your take on this. Do you think that the ceasefire is legit? And do you think that the Trump administration is serious about, use the term enforce the ceasefire? What are your thoughts?
No to both questions. One, there is evidence that Netanyahu has assured his former minister Ben-Gvir and his current minister Smotrich that this ceasefire is just a ruse to release the hostages. Once the hostages are released, Netanyahu will claim that Hamas has violated the ceasefire in some way and will begin the same genocidal actions that it's been doing for the last 15 months. So I don't think, one thing I agree with Trump, and there's not much I agree with him on, is that he said he realized Netanyahu does not want to make a deal. That has been realized by most of the world for a long time. Netanyahu isn't interested in a deal. He isn't interested in peace with the Palestinians. He's interested in the ethnic cleansing or genocide of all the Palestinians and the annexation, the complete annexation of Palestine by Israel. That has been his motivation all along. So recently, the last few days, Trump was asked if he thinks the ceasefire will hold, and he said, I don't know, it's their war, not ours. Yeah. So the fact that he doesn't want to get the U.S. involved in wars doesn't mean that he won't look the other way when one of his cronies, and he has great admiration for Netanyahu because Netanyahu is a strong man. He's a dictator. He runs the show, and Trump likes that. He's not going to interfere with him. Additionally, you have the U.S. Congress to deal with, who is beholden to the pro-Israeli lobbies. They get millions and millions of dollars in campaign contributions. They're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. So we've seen already that Trump has eliminated the sanctions against the terrorist attackers in the West Bank.
Mm-hmm.
His nominee, what's Elsie Stefanik? I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right.
Stefanik,
She has said that she believes that God promised all of that territory to the Israelis. So one of his cabinet ministers, at least one, is saying that U.S. governance should be directed by biblical statements.
It's just outrageous. I
It's
saw that
absolutely
statement.
outrageous. And this
And by
was
the way,
not
she wouldn't even acknowledge this kind of Palestinian self-determination. She was like, I'm not. She wouldn't say it.
She would.
wouldn't say it.
She said, "Oh, the Palestinians deserve much better." She was asked directly, "Do they? Yes or no? Do they deserve self-determination?" Well, they deserve much better than they have. She wouldn't answer that question, as you just said.
Mm-hmm. It seems that a deal has been made, a ceasefire for the West Bank, basically a ceasefire in Gaza in order to allow Israel to take the West Bank.
Mhm.
Because there was a question of, okay, well, what did Donald Trump promise in order to get this deal? Yeah, you can bully, but was it this notion of, we'll give you a free hand in the West Bank if you allow a ceasefire, even if the ceasefire is temporary? I mean, I've been watching what they've been doing in the West Bank. This has been appalling. I know I didn't bring you on for this, but you wrote the book, so I figured you'd be the person to talk to about it. What is going on in the West Bank? I mean, there was this talk that they were going to annex the West Bank. I mean, this was stuff that there was kind of in the reporting that was coming out of Haaretz and some of the other journals about some of the conversations that was taking place in the Netanyahu government. Do you see that happening? Is that what's taking place? Is that what we're seeing now?
Yes, there are a couple of things. One, Netanyahu's spokespeople have said they are practicing in the West Bank what they learned in Gaza. So the same kind of terrorism. It's not the same degree yet, but people are suffering horribly in the West Bank. That's been overlooked because of what's been happening in Gaza. But the motivation has always been annexation. We've seen it with the encroaching settlements. There's something like 800,000 illegal settlers living in the West Bank. Netanyahu has said not one of them will ever have to leave. All those settlements are illegal according to international law. Annexation is illegal according to international law. But international law is something that the Israeli government and the U.S. government have both proven they don't care about. It's their way or the highway. If they want to annex anything, they'll annex it. That's what Trump's talking about with the Panama Canal, Greenland, even Canada. So the idea of territorial integrity, of internationally recognized borders, these are not things that are of any concern to Netanyahu or Trump. So yes, what's happening in the West Bank is unspeakable, but it is part of the motivation and the process of the illegal annexation of the West Bank.
I was looking at some of the images that were coming out of Gaza. These images are heartbreaking. I'm going to show, let me see, just so the audience can see what I am talking about here with some of these images.
المناطق في شمال قطاع غزة.
This is stunning. So this is the hospital. What is it? Adeswan Hospital, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong with the name. And that hospital stayed there. I think it was one of the last hospitals in Gaza, just staying there, still dealing with patients, even when they were surrounded. And finally, when the doctor came out, the doctor was with the electric cord for his resistance to this level of barbarity. And, there are other images that are even more haunting, if such a thing could exist. I mean, in that picture, what you're seeing is clothing that was laid on the ground when the doctors and nurses came out. They were forced to strip. Here's another one on the level of devastation in Gaza also. It is hard to wrap your head around this. Like, it's just astonishing. How on earth are they expected to replenish this? Like, I mean, if you're right, then they're going to resume operations anyway. And I don't even know what else you can bomb at this point. But assuming for the moment that the ceasefire lasts for any length of time, how do you rebuild that? Is it possible to even rebuild that?
It will take years and years. And if Israel continues to blockade the Gaza Strip and only allow certain materials, it'll take, I read an estimate, 300 years. So whether the international community will allow this because it's allowed so much in the past remains to be seen. But Gaza can be rebuilt. The people of Gaza are very resilient. Many are trying to return to their homes or what's left of their homes in the north of Gaza now. I'm in contact with a few people in Gaza, and the horrific scenes that you've shown are scenes I've seen before. The world has to see these. But as far as rebuilding, it will take billions and billions of dollars in the efforts of several countries. The United States should have no involvement in it whatsoever, but other countries should. Middle Eastern countries certainly, China or Russia, if it's able to, they should be involved in the rebuilding, because it needs to. All the debris needs to be cleared, and people need to be housed during that time, and buildings need to be rebuilt. I want to just point out also that when you were showing the scenes from the hospital, one of the hospitals in Gaza, and the just utter destruction of it, bombing a hospital is a war crime. It is not legal under any circumstances. International law says clearly that even if there are so-called enemy soldiers hiding in the hospital, it is not legal to bomb the hospital. There has to be some kind of targeted attack. Now, again, we talk about, or we don't, but much of the media talks about Israel's right to defend itself. There is no right in international law for a country to defend itself against another country that it occupies, but there is a right in international law for the occupied country to resist the occupation in any way at its disposal, including armed struggle, which is what Palestine did on October 7th of 2023, and what it continues to do today.
You're absolutely right. It's amazing to me how the way they always kind of ignore that other part. Like for example, Israel will make this argument: we blew up an apartment complex and we killed 60 people because there was one person there. And it's like, okay, well, you need to be really careful with that line of argument. So if Hamas goes in, blow up a delicatessen, killing 20 people because there might be one person there that's a soldier, is that okay? And of course, the answer would be no. No, that's unacceptable. It's like, but that's what you do. That's been the modus operandi going all the way through this particular quote unquote war, as they call it. I mean, for all intents and purposes, this is not a war. These are not two sides with tanks. This is one side with nuclear weapons, fighting basically a resistance group at this point. Give me your take on, like, I always come to this conclusion that we can't go back to what it was on October 7th. But maybe I'm wrong on that. I mean, am I wrong on that? Like the entire way through, I kept saying to myself, there is no way we can go back to what's called normal with this kind of open air ghetto. But am I wrong on that? Am I being too hopeful that the result of this conflict and how, like, the loss of life, especially to the degree, I mean, we're talking about like 100,000 people dead, at least if we're going by Lancet numbers, and they're like digging people out of the rubble by the tune of hundreds. Am I wrong on that? Do we go back to some kind of relative normality with an open air ghetto? Or is this something else, something different with the expenditure of this much life loss?
Well, I hope that it will be there will be a change. I'm cautiously optimistic about that, but there is a strong possibility that things will go back to the way they've been for the last 50 some years in Gaza, and the last 77 throughout Palestine. The reason for this is associated with what you said before about how bombing an apartment building with 60 people because there might be one rebel in the building, but it's okay to kill those 60. But the reverse isn't true if someone blows up a delicatessen in Tel Aviv.
Right.
This is because of the Israeli government, and a large number of the Israeli people do not see Palestinians or any Arab as human. They're not equal to them. They are lesser. Their lives are expendable. And so killing them is no different than calling an exterminator because you have mice in your house. It's just getting rid of them. You don't think about them. Don't give them a second thought, whether they're men, women, and children. The population of Gaza prior to this genocide was 50% were under the age of 16. So that means 50% children. And as you said, at least 100,000 people have been killed. Now, you also talked about how, again, the 60 people bombed in a building to get one. Israel has the capability to do targeted assassinations, which they have done in Iran on more than one occasion, where they will single out one, usually a nuclear scientist, someone he might be riding his motorcycle through the streets, and he is assassinated. But They don't do this in Gaza because, well, these are simply Arabs. We can eliminate them all. Plus, there's the motivation of the more you kill and the more you exterminate, the easier it will be to annex the Gaza Strip. So I'm not optimistic about the ceasefire holding. I'm not optimistic about Netanyahu's and Israel's integrity regarding this, their desire to have a genuine ceasefire and to live peacefully with Palestinians. And I'm not optimistic about the world community that has allowed war crimes against humanity to be committed on a daily basis for the past 15 months, which we're all seeing on social media. I'm not optimistic about the international community preventing a return to the normal that the Palestinians have suffered from for all these generations.
How do you frame a solution to this? Because, when I've had a conversation with Israelis, it is a maddening conversation. In one sense, they would say, well, we don't want to live beside the Palestinians, so there's that. Two, we don't want to subsume the Palestinians. So it's like, we don't want a one-state solution, and we don't want a two-state solution. And they would say, well, we don't want a one-state solution because that's not Israel. That's not a Jewish state at that point. That's something else. And we want our Jewish state. And so it's like, okay, well, what about the two-state? And in the honest truth of it, as Donald Trump was talking about back then, Netanyahu doesn't want a two-state solution. Israelis in general. It's a fascist country. I've been to the country a few times. That is not their mindset. Like you say, they don't see them as human beings. So I'm at a loss for a solution. I mean, under their model, the only thing that you can do is exterminate everybody or push them out of the country. There's no other way around it if you're not on board for some kind of either one-state or two-state solution. Or is there something more clever that I'm just fundamentally missing? What's the outcome? What's the object? Like, what is the objective to shoot for? Because the two-state solution has always been used as this kind of dog and pony show without any real, reality associated with it. It's what politicians say for political expedience. It's not necessarily something that they actually do in order to make happen. Give me your thoughts on this.
Right. And the two-state solution, the U.S. government has always said the borders have to be established by negotiation between the two parties. Well, negotiations can't occur unless each party has something the other wants that it can only get by surrendering something it has. Israel takes whatever it wants with complete impunity. The Israeli government is always saying, "Oh, we'll negotiate without conditions." Well, of course, because they don't need any. They can kill, steal, kidnap, arrest, anything they want. So, and with impunity, what needs to happen is the borders of Israel and Palestine were established unjustly. I will submit, but they were established in 1947, 1948. Since then, Israel has continually encroached on Palestine's borders with the illegal settlements, with the blockade of the Gaza Strip, and so on, and the continued bombing. The international community has allowed this. What the international community needs to do is say enough. They need to further ostracize Israel. Now, something like 14 countries have now joined South Africa at the International Court of Justice to prosecute Israel for genocide. More countries have to do this. More countries have to sever ties with Israel. The victim card that Israel has played for so long has long since expired, and countries need to recognize that. Germany, which is providing the second largest amount of weapons to Israel for this genocide after the United States, the German government somehow thinks that it can compensate for one genocide by committing another one, by being complicit in another one. This makes no sense. The international community has to step up. That's difficult because in the United Nations Security Council, the United States has veto power, which is used repeatedly to protect Israel from its crimes. So that needs to be revamped. The General Assembly, which has the capacity, it's not easy to do, to override a UN Security Council veto, needs to implement that. But there needs to be this realization that, as you mentioned, Israel is a fascist state. It's an apartheid state. The Israeli government declared itself the nation state of the Jewish people a number of years ago. You can't be a Jewish state and democratic state. They don't go together.
Right.
That means everyone who isn't Jewish is a second-class citizen, as they are in Israel. So the entire world community has to recognize what Israel is and hold it accountable, hold its leaders accountable, hold its people accountable. And that means arrests by the International Court of Justice, trials at The Hague. It means severing relations. It means putting the economic squeeze on Israel. And the Israel economy has suffered greatly in the last 15 months, but the United States is there to bail it out. But this has to stop. International law is the answer. But to get there, countries have to recognize and support and enforce international law.
You may not know this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is going on internally in Israel? Because as you point out, the United States has been there to bail it out. I mean, we've given them billions, I think like 20, 30 billion, some insane amount of money. And keep in mind, this is not like, Israel is like 8 million people. If you're given that much money, I mean, like that's an astonishing sum of money. That's like more than $1 billion a person. No, I'm getting that wrong. But that's a huge amount of money, is my point. What has happened to the Israeli economy? What has happened? Do you know what's going on internally in the country itself by chance?
What I know is that the economy has taken a major hit. I can't quantify that anymore. I don't know that information. I know that the people in Israel do not feel secure in their homes, not only because of what happened on October 7th, but because of the war with Hezbollah in Lebanon, because of Yemeni attacks, because of Iranian attacks. The people are not secure there, and this war is only causing them to be less secure. It's interesting, you mentioned all the money that the United States has given to Israel. When Hillary Clinton was running for president, or when she was Secretary of State, I'm not sure exactly the time frame, she talked about how Israel has blossomed in the desert, blossomed like a rose. Well, you give that much money to Palestine, and Palestine will blossom like a rose too. But what they have done instead is constrict Palestine by preventing imports and exports, technology. So the Palestinian people have managed, despite these hardships, but give them that same amount of money, and they'll do fine. But in answer to your question, I do know that the economy has slowed down considerably, and that people in Israel are feeling very insecure, as they should, because their country is a rogue regime bombing its neighbors. A country can't do that without some blowback. And that's what Israel has been and continues to receive, not only in terms of, as I mentioned, the bombs and drones from Yemen and Iran and so on, but just from international reputation, which is greatly tarnished, as it should be today.
Does international reputation, clearly it matters. So that's not the question I guess I want to ask. But it doesn't necessarily seem like it has had the bang for the buck that you would think when you have the entire world screaming at you, basically effectively saying you're committing a genocide, and you continue to commit the genocide. I've said on more than one occasion, international law doesn't exist. And, we've ended up in this place where might makes right, even if it's wrong. And I have to be honest with you, I have been shocked completely. I would have never thought that we would have been okay, funded, backed, the complete destruction and murder on a large scale in the way that we have. I have never seen anything like this. Nothing in my lifetime has come close to this. And yet, here we are. And it continues. Like, I don't know where to place that. And when my country has foot the bill to 70 to 80% of the resources that has gone into it, I don't know what to do with that. I just don't know what to do with that. Give me a take just to close it. How do you frame that? Because I don't have a good framing for that. I feel guilty about it because my tax dollars go into that. I've sat there and we get desensitized on some level to watching just murder on our screens day after day after day, and it doesn't stop. It keeps going. Give me your take on this.
There are a few things that, one, the fact that the government is okay with this. One of the reasons I believe that Donald Trump is president today and not Kamala Harris is because she would not differentiate from Biden in what's happening in Gaza.
Agreed.
She kept saying, "Oh, the United States is working tirelessly for a ceasefire." That makes no sense when the United States was supplying, as you said, 60 to 70% of the weapons for this genocide, and not only the weapons that it normally sends, hundreds of millions of dollars of additional weaponry to finance this genocide. So that, I believe, is why a major reason why Kamala Harris is not president today. The fact that the international community is, or the international reputation of Israel is so tarnished, but the Israeli government will convince most of the people in Israel that it's just anti-Semitism, that people hate Jews, and just the fact that the Israeli government is killing 100,000 people, men, women, and children, defenseless, killing them in the most savage ways, violating international law, committing genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity. Oh no, it's all anti-Semitism. And the people in Israel, many people in Israel, not all certainly, but many people in Israel have grown up with that concept and are willing to accept it. The fact that the United States, Canada, so many Western nations are willing to look the other way is appalling and absolutely, as you said, unbelievable. That our governments, your government, my government, and I have dual citizenship, so U.S. and Canada, but that these governments are supporting this horrendous genocide is beyond comprehension.
Yeah, it's astonishing. It blew me away. I would have, look, man, we have done some horrible things as a country.
Mm-hmm.
This, I would never, like, this blew me away. Robert, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it. Robert Fatima, he is author, journalist, and activist working for peace and social justice. He is author of the book, Settler Colonialism in Palestine and Kashmir. Thank you, my man. I appreciate it. Be safe.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. The man